Hey guys, welcome back to another Gaming Memories video. Here we are actually taking a look at one of my most memorable games that I played actually on the PlayStation back in the day, and that is WWF Warzone. That was released on the PlayStation back in 1998 and it was published by Acclaim Entertainment. This was pretty much the game that was actually one of the first 3D wrestling games within what was then the WWF franchise, before it was actually changed over to WWE. And this was during the likes of the Attitude Era. I remember I was actually about 15 when actually this game actually came out, and it had been out actually a number of months, and myself and my brothers, like, we were big into the wrestling in years gone by. And the likes of Hulk Hogan and all that was wrestling in the WWF at that time, but I hadn't gotten back into it for quite a while, and we were starting, my younger brothers were starting to get into it, because my youngest brother, he was only about 6 or 7 at the time, and he was actually a big Stone Cold Steve Austin fan, and we started watching again and started to get back into it, and because of that kind of got the wind of this game. And I remember actually a friend of mine that was in school at the time, in secondary school, actually had it, and I asked him for a loan of it, so I ended up getting a loan of it off him for about 2 weeks, and I kid you not, myself and my brother played it to death. But this was actually, by playing this game, it reignited that fire for wrestling, because this was the start of the next couple of years of just crazy stories, like, because we actually got addicted to the wrestling again, because again you had the characters of that era. You had Stone Cold Steve Austin, you had Triple H, you had The Rock, you had The Undertaker, and there was so many memorable characters, and the wrestling back then, in my opinion, was definitely probably the best era of wrestling. It was just really cool. You had the likes of Kane, and you had other really big name characters that had come in at that time, and they really stood out. Now, this game here, playing it, definitely took a while to get used to, because it is very clunky. It is very slow to get familiar with it, but when you got the hang of it, you actually could pull off some really cool moves. It took a while to get the finishers done, though. You'd have to keep going through the move lists, pressing the start button to try and figure out what move to do next. My youngest brother at the time, he couldn't figure out how to do the move, so all he did was just punch and kick everybody, but he was just so lucky at the game. He just kept beating everybody because you couldn't beat him. You couldn't block his moves around because he just kept punching you. He just kept spamming the same moves over and over again, and we were cracking up. But we used to have a lot of fun playing this game. But it led on to, like, say watching the likes of the wrestling every Friday night. We watching like Raw on Friday night, and just the whole lot of us, myself and even our mates, would all call around to the house, and the whole lot of us would be just sitting there. There could be at least 7 or 8 of us sitting in the living room all watching the likes of the wrestling on the Friday night. And then we'd be playing this game here throughout the week as well, even at the weekends. We'd be just flat out playing multiplayer and just having so much fun. But it led on to, like, us getting in trouble so much when we used to be practicing the wrestling moves and each other acting the aegis when we were kids, because again, we were young, we were just silly and naive. I'll be honest, like, with some of the stories that we go back to, like, I can't even share them in this video, but how we actually didn't really hurt ourselves or even kill ourselves, I don't know. we caused so much mess in the house. We broke things. My parents absolutely killed us, and they still don't even know half of the stories of what went on when we were messing, doing the wrestling moves on each other. We wrecked the place. When I look back, it wasn't funny back then, but when I look back and now, it was hilarious, like how silly we were, and just at the same time it was pure innocence, but it was also dangerous. We did have to be careful, but yeah, I think we kind of took it a bit too far. But to be honest, I know myself, I'm not the only one in saying that, because anyone that's a wrestling fan will have actually done that type of stuff at this stage. And if you played games like this here, it definitely helped really influence that, along so watching the likes of the weekly TV programs and following your favourite wrestlers and so forth. But even at that, playing this game here, like, it actually did reignite that kind of love for the likes of the WWF and wrestling in general. But even at that, it made you more aware of significant characters that you actually got to see that you didn't know about before. Some of them maybe are new, and you actually started to really get behind a lot of the characters, and you fell in love with a lot of the newer characters in the franchise over the years as well. And a lot of it had to be because you seen them in this game. You're like, oh, I remember that guy. So then you start following him then. And it was a fun time to be a wrestling fan, and I will actually admit, because I remember even when I was at school, like everybody, like I know at school most people were wrestling fans as well. I think everybody was back then. It was just one of those things, and I think because the Attitude Era of wrestling, I think was probably the most successful and the most popular. In my opinion, it was definitely the best. I haven't watched wrestling as much now in the years gone by, so it was interesting to go back to actually play this game after all those years, and I will admit it's definitely as clunky and as hard to play as I remember. It definitely takes a while to really get familiar with the moves, and even at that, I was not the best at the game anyway. My brothers and stuff were a lot better at it than I was. Fighting games I was okay at them, but I was never fantastic at them. But I would always give them a go, and especially if I enjoyed them, I didn't really care whether it was good or not. I just enjoyed them anyway. And this year was just was one of those exceptions. But it is still as clunky as I do remember. I did have a bit of fun, but trying to remember how to do the moves, even to do pins and stuff like that, it definitely took a while to get familiar with it again. But again, if you're a wrestling fan, that's what these games were. These games, like back on the PlayStation 1, and there was a lot of them. You had, like, so this year, there was earlier titles of the WWF games. They went on then later to do WWF Attitude. It was a highly anticipated sequel to this. There was more wrestlers and more customization options. And then later on then you had the likes of the SmackDown series as well that was developed by THQ, and they were actually phenomenal games. So they were a lot more free flowing, more fluent, and they weren't as tricky to get used to compared to these games. But the developers of these games later went on to do the likes of the ECW franchise of games, and they were very, very similar. They played very, very much the same. They just had the characters from the ECW franchise at that time period. You also had a load of WCW wrestling games, and there was even other kind of not so much mainstream wrestling games as well. There was another ones, I think, with some earlier titles, Power Move Pro Wrestling, and I think there was a few wrestling games in Japan. There was actually a ton of wrestling games that were actually released on the PlayStation, like sort of fighting games or sports, like boxing games and all these kind of like extreme kind of sports kind of games. There was a lot of them on the PlayStation. So this one here definitely was one of the highlight reels, because it was the one that really got me back into the wrestling in general. Again, because it reintroduced me to a lot of the old characters I grew up with, but also to introduce me to new characters as well, the likes of The Rock, Stone Cold, and some of the most memorable characters in the history of wrestling. So it was cool to be a wrestling fan at that time, and even just get to play these games. Again, by going back to even play a lot of these games, I remember even later on, one of my other brothers, Martin, he was a big ECW fan, and he ended up getting one of the ECW games, I think it was Anarchy Rules. I will do another video with that at some point. I'll go through a lot of them. And I remember he was a big fan of that, but I remember actually playing it, and it was identical pretty much to this. It just had the characters were different, and there was a few different things that you could do, but the controls and the aesthetics of the game were very, very similar. Like, very, very similar. It just played pretty much the same. So it's like the developers would have just used the same engine and the same kind of characteristics of these older type games and put them into those type of ones. It was an easier thing obviously for them to do back then, because they already had the engines developed, so it's just a case of just rinse and repeat pretty much, and just change a few things out, because again they had different licenses and different brands and so forth, but you can still use the same kind of concepts. But again, if you're a big fan of these type of games, it didn't really matter, because you just wanted to play it for the characters. That was the thing. So that's what made them so much fun. Again, by playing this game, it really did bring back so many memories of fun times we used to have, and even the amount of trouble that we used to get into. Like, we got up to some sort of all sorts of mischief, but not only just with these games, but just with wrestling in general. Like I said, how we didn't hurt ourselves or kill ourselves, I do not know. But yeah, when I look back, it's funny. We were just a bunch of idiots, but harmless. If we were doing any harm, we were only harming ourselves. That was pretty much what it was. But again, just good times. And I think games older games do reflect that. That's why, like, so I always even go back, like even mentioning gaming, and especially with the PlayStation 1, because it is reflective of the memories that you have. The PlayStation was part of all that growing up for me and my brothers and my friends. That's why I do even include them a lot in the videos, because we were all in it together pretty much. We all kind of went through this, and we all still talk about it today. We always go back to some of these kind of moments of games when we really, really enjoyed them, because the way they really were, and they really stood out. So they did, and they kind of pretty much shaped the way we see things even like today. It's funny what games can do when you're younger like as well, so it is an interesting concept. If you haven't played any of these games, or even the WWF games, the earlier ones on the PlayStation, I do recommend that you try them out. Even this one here, just to see the differences between the older style of games and the comparisons compared to modern games today. I do recommend you check it out. But I also do recommend that you don't do wrestling moves on anybody. It's not safe to do. Don't be an idiot. That's the one thing I'll say. But again, just enjoy the games for what they are and just have a laugh. And if you do like all these old characters, definitely feel free to give it a go. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game and what you thought of it back in the day. Did you enjoy it, or did you find it as clunky as hell? Make sure to share your thoughts down in the comments below. So if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. Also be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be updated whenever I release future content, and feel free to share the video, as I am going to be revisiting a lot of these older style wrestling games from back in the day and sharing my thoughts and experiences with everyone. So as always, make sure to keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and keep those gaming memories alive.